Hello, everybody. So glad to be back. I hope you guys had a wonderful summer. Uh, we will just put uh, Mother Delamort's summer behind us. It was extremely hectic, and so I'm so glad to be back. We're going to give everybody a little bit of time to get in here, get settled. I know it takes a minute for all the notifications to go out to all our different platforms. And I do believe we may be going live tonight to Rumble. Um, First time we've ever done this, so I'll have to go back and check and see how that played out. So yeah, um, so let's give everybody a little bit of time, and then we're going to do some house cleaning, and then we'll be getting started. When you get in, say hello. I see we are starting to get some folks in here. Like I said, we normally give it about 5 minutes because we go to so many different platforms. It usually takes a little bit of time for all those notifications to go out. So we're going to give everybody a little bit of time to do that. And I'm checking on Facebook right now because it looks like they're running extremely slow, which is not surprising. Yeah. So if you're one of our regulars, go ahead and share out because it does look like some of these platforms are running a little slow this evening. So yeah, get back to over. Hey, Frank, how are you? So sorry, I kind of rearranged my desk here. Frank says hello. Well, hello. I am so glad you're here. I hope you are feeling better. Um, we've been thinking about you. So, um, so yeah, share out because it looks like, especially Facebook is being slow. Again, for the folks that are in here, I do believe we're going live to Rumble. Everything looks good on this end. First time we've done a live stream to Rumble. So this will be exciting. This will be really exciting. I'll go back and see how that works out. Um, so yeah, so we'll give everybody about another minute, and then we will get started. And this story that I've got picked out, and well, not story. I mean, it's part of history. Is actually really satisfying when it comes to a lot of dark history. It often leaves you or leaves the observer kind of befuddled, or there's not really closure. But with this one, there is closure, and it's quite satisfying in a roundabout way. So I think you'll enjoy it. Again, it is a little obscure, but I like those. I mean, I know eventually we'll probably do some of the big ones, but you hear those so much that I like to kind of concentrate on the lesser known uh, aspects of dark history that you may not have heard of. So, okay. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started on our housekeeping. Of course, first, I've already mentioned Rumble. My name is Mother Della Mort, and I am your host for the Horror Gallery. And we delve into all sorts of high strangeness and dark history. So that's my jam. As far as housekeeping, I want to thank, of course, all of our supporters. You guys are just absolutely magnificent. And if it was not for you guys, we wouldn't be doing this. So I really do appreciate it. I would also like to thank our ex supporters. So we have a goal. We always try to, work with goals, and you guys have really, really um, stepped up. We had a 500 follower goal that we were shooting for by the end of October, and it looks like we may actually reach that before October. So fingers crossed, and lots of thank yous from the PBDC collective for supporting us. Let's see. So patron. All right, so if you will notice the ticker down there at the bottom, if you're new to my show, we are not safe for work. If you will look, went in the wrong direction, right up here in the corner, viewer discretion advised. So we are not safe for work. So you need to go through your browser to find us if you're looking to subscribe. Now, the really cool thing is we have a $1 and a $5 tier. Normally, the $1 is just like, hey, we support you, but we do try to give you a little something every once in a while. And since this is the fall premiere for my newest season, our $1 tier will be getting the after show. We always have an after show that is for patrons only, that will either expand on what we're already talking about, or it may be a completely different subject altogether. So if you join at the $1 tier tonight, then you will have access to tonight's after show. And it's kind of a cool story. I happened across it, and I think you'll find it interesting as well. For our Patreon or Patreon supporters now, from what I understand, Apple Pay is changing a few things. The general consensus is it's not going to really affect the people that are using or have used the Apple Pay for their patron membership, like your grandfathers. It is the general consensus on this. But if you are looking to join our Patreon, and you normally do use Apple Pay, I would probably advise you, because they are going up on they're charging an additional fee on top of what we normally charge for our $1 or our $5 tier. So it's going to be more economical if you go through your browser to subscribe, which you'll kind of need to do that anyway, because being that we're not safe for work, until you subscribe, we're not going to show up on the app. So do it that way. That way you save yourself that extra however many dollars or 30% or whatever it is they're charging. You save yourself on that. So we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. I wanted to thank one of our sponsors, which is Spook Trail Haunted Maze. I know that there is definitely a lot of fun to be had in the bigger haunts, and they definitely have their place. But I, from personal experience, I really enjoy the smaller haunts. They really have a place where you can build memories. If you love the spooky season as much as we do, where you can really create memories, and have a lot of fun. And Spook Trail they're very unique. I will say that. We spent some time last year helping out one night with the actual haunt actors and doing some things over there. And it was a whole lot of fun. So I definitely would suggest that you check them out if you're in the area. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to play their their sponsored ad before we get started. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to look at the comments, and then we'll get started on our story. So yeah, be right back.
This fall, prepare to enter a realm of terror.
This forest is creepy. I'm scared. Are you sure we're going the right way?
Where shadows dance and whispers haunt the night.
Come on, it's just some spooky old woods.
Did you hear about what happened to those kids last year?
Let's not talk about that. It creeps me out.
But once you enter, there's no turning back.
right, so we're back. So yeah, if you are in the Quanton, I hope I said it right, area, Quanton, Alabama, check them out and show your support. Really, really cool place. A lot of fun, whole lot of fun. All right, so we have a couple of people in here that have popped into the comments. Again, our ex followers. Unfortunately, the streaming software that we use, for whatever reason, it does not pick up your comments. So I will go back and check those after the show. But let's see who we have. So we've got Frank, and again, he says, Odd Mother. So we are glad Frank is here. And then we also have Raven, and Raven says hello. And then Frank is sharing out. So yeah, so thank you guys for sharing out. I still don't see a notification from Facebook, so we shouldn't be surprised. But let's go ahead and get started. So tonight, the story that I bring you is called A Ghost Story That Caught a Serial Killer. We're going to go back. June 12th, 1865, Roxbury, Massachusetts. It's a warm and pleasant day, and on this balmy, sun-drenched summer's day, as the work week commences, the air is alive with the bustling cadence of commerce. Shopkeepers with practiced ease tend to their wares, while shoppers intent on errands weave through the marketplace, each absorbed in the rhythm of a daily transaction. The children of a recent widowed Lynn dressmaker, Isabella, age 15, and John Joyce, age 8, depart from their aunt's house in the southern end. With a picnic basket and travel fare for the day, they were destined for a day spent in the famed Jamaica Plains countryside. They paid a visit to their grandmother at the intersection of Newland and West Concord Street, and at 11 a.m. in the morning, they ventured forth from her home, only to vanish into the ether, never again to be glimpsed in the realm of the living. Their announced destination was the verdant expanse of Mary's Woods, situated along what is now known as the Arbor Way. But as twilight descended, the children, unaccompanied on their outing, failed to return. An earnest search ensued, though thwarted by the lush, dense foliage of the early summer. Though it was unseasonably hot, it would not be until the following Sunday that the young pair would be discovered, quite accidentally, by a group of hikers traversing another area known as Bussy Woods, which was further south than their original destination. And if not for an obscure ghost story, this true dark history tale may have been lost to time entirely. Now, 1865 was a pivotal year in American history. The American Civil War, which ended on May 9th of 1865, was basically just coming to an end, as well as on April 14th of 1865, actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Abraham Lincoln while he was attending a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The 13th Amendment would also be ratified on December 18th of this year, abolishing slavery in the United States and freeing 4 million enslaved African Americans. The Secret Service was also created to prevent widespread counterfeiting that was plaguing the financial system. And, of course, the beginning of the Reconstruction period. Now, the Bussy Woods were part of an old 400-acre farm on both sides of Bussy Street, given by Benjamin Bussy to Harvard College for the Horticulture Institution. Eventually, 120 acres of the farm and the woods would become the Arnold Arboretum, with the Bussy Institute, now State Lab, on one side. Now, both Roxbury and Bussy Woods are currently and now part of the city of Boston. Now, Isabella was found in the hollow of a rock atop a hill. And I quote, "The murderer attempted a deed upon the body of the little girl, despite her efforts to fend him off. From the scene, it seemed clear that Isabella and her brother had been playing contentedly in the woods, creating little hillocks of moss and fashioning wreaths out of oak leaves and twigs, when they were unexpectedly attacked. The assailant, which the newspapers called, and I quote, a fiend in human shape, attacked the girl first, cutting her savagely with a knife, tearing off her undergarments, and basically sexually assaulting her. The coroner found 27 stab wounds in her torso, another 16 in her neck. The ground around her body was saturated with blood. She had apparently put up a desperate fight, grabbing the long blade of the knife and trying to wrestle it from the attacker's hands. The index finger of her right hand was completely severed, and the rest of her fingers were mangled and bloody and hanging loose by the bits of skin. Her clothing was soaked in her blood, and clumps of grass and dirt had been roughly shoved into her mouth to try to stifle her cries. Her brother was found later a quarter of a mile away by Bussey's Brook in a condition that sickened even Civil War veterans who viewed the body. He was found lying face down in the dirt, possibly having tripped over a tree root when he was attempting to escape. The killer had pounced on the boy's back and stabbed him half a dozen times. The wounds were so deep that in several instances the blade had gone all the way through the young boy's body and pierced the ground beneath him. It was surmised that before noon he had left his sister, who of course was already deceased, and had finally been attacked by his sister's murderer, which would tell you that the murderer was still stalking that area. Now, the bodies of the children were solemnly returned to Lynn, which is kind of like, I guess, like a little community for internment. Their untimely death cast a pall of grief and ignited a fervent quest for justice. Authorities post rewards, and 7 individuals were questioned, but ultimately released for lack of evidence. The site where the young girl met her fate became a pilgrimage of sorts, with visitors erecting a memorial cairn and inadvertently erasing any potential evidence in an era where forensic science was basically non existent. And that seemed to really be kind of I don't know, kind of the norm. Getting a lot of looky loos that wanted to see crime scenes, take little bits of souvenirs, things like that, and they would just absolutely destroy any type of like evidence or footprints or anything like that. They would just completely trample it. So, that's sad. Now, the site where the young girl met her fate, like I said, became a pilgrimage. To safeguard the community, a police presence was established in Bussey Woods for a time. But by the end of June of 1865, the search for the murderer had worn itself out. Shortly after, Henry Johnson Brent, the founder of the well known Knickerbocker magazine in New York City, experienced a strange occurrence. While walking across the grounds to meet a friend close to where the murders occurred, he saw what appeared to be a ghostly man near the boundary between Bussey and Motley Woods. And I quote, the following event took place on a moonlit night at 8:30 p.m., some 3 weeks after the brutal murders of the Joyce children on June 12th of 1865 in the Bussey Woods. It is described by J.P. Brent, or by J.P. visitor H.J. Brent, in the book he wrote in 1878 entitled Was It a Ghost? And you can find this particular part in chapter 10. Upon a still and clear night, I went out of the cottage and, taking 2 dogs with me, strolled down through the stable yard and past the garden until I came to the brow of the hill that formed the apex of my friend's grasslands. The brow of the hill was flat all about me, and at the base ran off into a meadow. the opposite side of which was overlooked by Bussy Woods. From where I stood, several pines rose out of the even surface of the forest, making, as with an uplifted hand spread out, the place where the girl's murder had been done. On my left was Motley Woods, drawing up with its intense shadows close to the dividing wall. From the wall to where I stood, all was clear and distinct, save where the shadows fell over the ground. The wall and the wood on my left ran down to that corner at Bussy Creek, which was only a short distance, about 50 feet, from the spot where the boy had fallen. Some 250 yards away, and close to the corner just mentioned, was a clump of trees. And then, straight before me, without an intervening object, the dark wood gloomed over the rock of the girl's death. My purpose was simply to take the cooling air from the winnowing trees. It was the habit of my host, who did business in Boston, of leaving the train at Forest Hill Station at 9 o'clock. As a general thing, and keeping to South Street until he got to the bottom of the hill near to where the brook crosses the road. He would then enter the lowlands at the outskirts of Bussy Woods, and thence follow the path and up the hillside covered by motley woods, keeping close to the wall until he reached the point of the wall near which I stand, pass over it, and be home. Knowing that my host was irregular as to his hours of returning home at night, I was not surprised when I saw a figure leaning over the wall for an instant within about 20 feet of me. I paused a moment and then crossed over to the side on which I was. Seeing that he had stopped, I spoke aloud these words: "Hello, Dan, is that you?" I thought I could discover the figure and recognize its movements. There was too great a shade thrown over the wall to enable me to distinguish a face so familiar to me. To my appeal, there was no reply. And then, in an instant, the impression came upon me that if it really was my friend, he was testing my nerves. Up to this moment, I had never had a thought apart from him. While I stood perfectly motionless, waiting for some recognition of my appeal, the figure advanced slowly in a direct line from the wall, leaving the shadow, and stopped before me and not 20 feet away from me. I saw at once that it was somebody I had never seen before. Then, in the light, without even a weed to obstruct my vision, as soon as he stopped, I called, "Speak, or I will fire." It was at this point that I observed especially the behavior of the dog. Upon Up to this time, they had been quiet, lying on the grass, but now they both got up, and I felt on each side of me the pressure of their bodies. They were evidently frightened, and I saw that they were looking with every symptom of terror at the figure that stood so near us without motion. Excuse me, I've got the creeping crud. The figure never once turned its head directly towards me, but seemed to fix its look eastward over where the pine trees broke the clear horizon on the murder hill. This inert pose was preserved but for a moment, for as quick as the flash of gunpowder, it wheeled as upon a pivot, and making one movement as of a man commencing to step out towards the wall, he disappeared. He was gone. To my vision, it never crossed the space between where it had stood and the outline of the shade thrown by the trees upon the ground. One step after turning was all I saw, and then it vanished. What I saw, I relate exactly as it happened. Can I describe this figure, you will ask? It looked like painted air. There was no elaborate appearance. Indeed, I could not make out the fashion of the garment. It was more occupied in the effort to recognize a human being in the figure that was before me. He looked dark gray from head to foot. Body he had, legs, arms, and a head, but the face I could not distinctly see as he turned it from me. Now, Brent truly felt that the event was something beyond his ability to reconcile by the unusual rules of explanation and that it deserved publication. All right, so let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we'll get right back to this because I see a couple of people coming in here. We have Nadine. Hello, Nadine. How are you? So glad you're here. Was he a werewolf? No, he was not werewolf. Frank asked if he was werewolf. And then Calvin. Hello, Calvin. How are you? Calvin's over on Twitch. Hello. All right, so let's go ahead and get back to this. Now, on March of 1866, the Boston Weekly Voice hinted at a breakthrough. A man known for his violent tendencies, arrested in August of 1865 for burglary, boasted in confinement about the Roxbury job, suggested a readiness to kill again. This revelation came from a fellow inmate appalled by the man's arrogance, leading to the thwarting of an escape plot. The subject, dubbed Scratch Gravel, was convicted of burglary and transferred to state prison, where authorities tried in vain to extract a confession. In a strategic move, a detective posing as a sympathetic Southerner was placed in Gravel's cell. Gravel, warming to his cellmate, hinted at involvement in the children's murders, but stopped short of a confession. Despite these connections, the Boston police remained skeptical. Gravel's knowledge could easily have been gleaned from newspapers, and without compelling evidence, he appeared more as a boastful rogue than an actual murderer. Thus, the case of the Jamaica Plains murders and most chilling and unresolved crime lay dormant until it took another bizarre turn. In December of 1866, the skeleton of a man was found in Needham Woods, not far from Boston, and a quantity of hair was found nearby, which resembled the hair of a man seen in Bussey Woods the day of the murder. From this scant clue, the skeleton was prostated to be the man who killed the Joyce children. He had taken to the woods to elude capture and died there. That was the assumption. While not everyone was satisfied with this conclusion, this pretty much brought the case to a close, essentially. As time stretched into months and then years without any arrests, the brutal murder of the Joyce children, once labeled by the newspapers as, and I quote, one of the most horrible and revolting crimes which has ever occurred in New England. It seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. Years passed, and the memory of the crime faded into the background. However, in early summer of 1872, 7 years after the tragic deaths of Isabella and John Joyce, the fresh chapter began when Franklin Evans moved in with his aging sister, Miss Deborah Day, at her Northwood, New Hampshire farmhouse. Franklin Evans, at 64, was a lean and weathered figure, known for his aimless and unproductive lifestyle. A writer of the time described him as, and I quote, he belonged to that numerous class of deadbeats that are always broke. Roaming the New England landscape, Evan lived off the charity of his grown children, borrowed petty sums from kin and friends, and openly begged from passerbyers. His scant legitimate income was derived from gathering medical plants for Dr. F. W. Hanson of Manchester, from whom he foraged in the woods. His nomadic existence had endowed him with an intimate understanding of the terrain, and his skill in procuring botanical remedies was widely acknowledged. Yet, even in this, Evans' integrity wavered. He styled himself as a botanical physician and sold ineffective treatments to unsuspecting rural households. Evans also masqueraded as an itinerant priest or preacher, exploiting the religious zeal of the period. He affiliated himself with the Second Advent Society, proclaiming himself a minister of the gospel, and managed to extract modest funds from fellow believers under the guise of spiritual work. However, his arrest for associating with prostitutes deeply offended the society. This was not his sole encounter with legal trouble. He faced charges ranging from minor theft to passing counterfeit $10 bills, and even attempted to swindle Travelers Insurance Company of Boston out of more than $1,500, which was a lot of money back then. Had these been the extent of his misdeeds, Evans might have been dismissed as merely a petty crook, a charlatan peddling false cures and cons. Yet, as the nation would chillingly discover, he was far more sinister, a figure whose actions were so vile that contemporaries struggled to believe that they were committed by a human being, described by one newspaper as an act, and I quote, too horrible for anything in human form to have perpetrated. Now, when Evans arrived at his sister's farm that summer, the household consisted of four individuals: Mrs. Deborah Day and her husband Sylvester, their widowed daughter Susan Lovering, and Susan's daughter Georgiana. This young woman, Evans' grandniece, soon became the target of his vile desires. Mere days after his arrival, he attempted to seduce her. When rebuffed, he devised a sinister plot described by one account as, and I quote, a deeply laid plan designed for no other purpose than to lure his victim into his lecherous grasp. Adjacent to the Day farmhouse lay a vast forest, the largest in the country, sprawling over 2,000 acres. On the evening of Monday, October 21st, 1872, after spending much of the day away, Evans returned home excuse me, claiming that he had been setting snares for partridges in the woods. The next morning, he persuaded his niece, Georgiana, to join him in checking these traps. Despite finding them empty, he demonstrated how the snares operated. Small loops hidden within the underbrush, intended to catch birds by the neck as they passed through. Georgiana, fascinated by the mechanisms, remained unaware that these snares were meant for her. On the morning of Friday, October 25th, Evans requested another favor from Georgiana. He was to perform some tasks for a neighbor, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Hill, and would be away all day. He asked that she could check the partridge traps for him. Initially hesitant, she eventually agreed. After Evans departed um, for Hill's farm miles away, Georgiana secured her hair with a comb, wrapped herself in a shawl, and ventured into the woods. When Georgiana didn't return for lunch, her grandfather set out to find her. After failing to locate her, he returned home to inform her mother, who was immediately filled with dread. Together, they rushed back into the forest, calling out her name as they searched. They soon came across her shawl, caught on a branch, and nearby they found her comb, shattered, with strands of her hair still caught within it. The ground bore signs of a struggle marked by footprints, one set from a man's boots and the other from girls' shoes. Sylvester Day would later testify that this indicated a squabble. Overcome with fear, they continued their search but found no further trace of Georgiana. Rushing back to the farmhouse, they raised the alarm among the neighbors. The rest of the weekend and into Saturday and Sunday, hundreds combed the woods, but to no avail. Suspicion quickly turned to Franklin Evans. When the authorities checked with Daniel Hill, it became clear that Evans' alibi was false. Hill hadn't seen him in over a week, let alone asked for his help that day. Moreover, a young man named James Pender reported seeing Evans enter the woods around 8:30 a.m. on Friday, just half an hour before Georgiana had vanished into the same forest. Sheriff Henry Dew interrogated Evans, who failed to provide a credible explanation for his whereabouts on the day of Georgiana's disappearance. He was promptly arrested, and in Evans' pocket, Drew found a wallet, money, obscene books of the time, like pornographic at the time, a bottle of liquor, and a common bone handled knife with two blades, blood stained and sharp as a razor. Despite his arrest, Evans initially denied any knowledge of Georgiana's fate. However, when assured by Drew that confessing would not bring him harm, Evans altered his tale. He claimed that Georgiana was safe, having been taken by a man from Kingston named Webster, who intended to marry her and had paid for her abduction. Though skeptical, Drew set out for Kingston, only to discover the story was a complete fabrication. Returning to the jail, he persisted in questioning Evans, offering him liquor and even suggesting he could help him flee to Canada if he confessed. On October 31st, 6 days after Georgiana vanished, Evan capitulated. He agreed to lead Drew to where he had left her body. They trekked through the dense forest, over rugged terrain, and along secluded paths until they reached a secluded clearing deep within the woods. There, beneath the roots of a fallen tree, Evans indicated a mound of leaves, whispering, "There she is." Drew carefully swept aside the leaves, and by the faint glow of his lantern, he beheld the pale, disfigured face of Georgiana Lovering. At the grim discovery site, Eben J. Parsley and Alonzo Tuttle, accompanied by the local physician, Dr. Caleb Hansen, stood aghast at the sight of Georgiana's violated body. Overcome with horror, Parsley confronted Evans, and I quote, "How did you come to do such bloody deeds?" With a nonchalant shrug, Evans reposed, "I suppose the evil one got the upper hand of me." Dr. Hansen, kneeling beside the body, noted the telltale signs of strangulation, her eyes bulging, tongue swollen and protruding, and dark bruises encircling her throat. The extent of her mutilation was appalling. Evans later admitted to raping her lifeless body and then using the bone handled knife to disembowel her, seeking her uterus. He had also removed her vulva, which was concealed under a rock. I don't understand criminal behavior. Um, when Sheriff Drew, in disbelief, asked why he had perpetrated such an atrocity, Evans chillingly explained it was to gain some knowledge of the human system that might be of use to me as a doctor. As Drew escorted the old man back to the jail, he posed one final question. "What did you set those snares for, Frank?" Evans, with a smug grin, replied, "I set them to catch the girl, and I catched her." All right, so let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we are going to get to our midway break, and then we will get back to this. Oh, so Frank says this. Hold on. This could be a Cannibal Corpse song. Yes, the ghost story that caught a serial killer. Absolutely, it could. It absolutely could. All right. All right. So we will be right back. We're going to go ahead to a quick break and then we'll get back to this. And I'm going to drink some water.
Blazing skies, the world in flames. Nuclear fire, unforgiving claims. I survived through the dust and ash. Came back in time to give you a chance.
All right. We're back. And I feel much better. I needed that water. All right. So let's get back to this real quick. So Frank Evans' trial commenced on February 3rd of 1873. Though it was more of a formality than than actually, I mean, it really wasn't necessary, is what I'm trying to say. Um, Now, the verdict was anticipated by all, including Evans himself. The only notable incident during the 3-day trial occurred on the morning of February 5th when, while his guards stepped away to get water, Evans attempted suicide by fashioning a noose from one of his suspenders and attaching it to a hook on the ceiling. The guard's timely return thwarted the attempt, as reported by the newspapers, who noted, and I quote, he seized Evans and disengaged him from the hook. Many suspected this suicide, however, was a bid, uh, just basically calculated to grant, kind of sympathy and to help support an insanity defense for his trial. If so, though, it was unsuccessful. Evan was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by hanging on February 17th of 1874. A local newspaper gleefully remarked that for his, and I quote, unnameable and incredible crime, he will swing like a dog, advising those interested in witnessing the execution to apply early for the scarce reserved seats. Escorted by Rottingham County High Sheriff J.W. Odlin, Evans was taken by train to Concord State Prison. Over 800 people congregated at the station, not just out of morbid curiosity about the murder of Georgiana Lovering, but also due to Evans' confessions to other heinous acts, cementing his reputation as one of the most monstrous figures of his time. Franklin Evans' descended into murder began almost 15 years prior, during a visit to Derry, New Hampshire. While passing the Mills residence, he spied through a window and saw a young girl about 5 years old that was playing alone. Driven by a desire to obtain a body for surgical purposes, he entered the house, abducted the child, and took her into the woods where he strangled her. Upon undressing her, he found her body was deformed, which filled him with such disgust that he abandoned his gruesome intentions and buried her beneath a decaying tree stump. 3 years after that, in Augusta, Maine, he abducted 14-year-old Anna Sibley. She was walking home from school. He assaulted her in a secluded part of the woods, slitting her throat and concealing her body under leaves. Just months before his arrival at his sister's home in Northwood in May of 1872, Evans committed another atrocity, raping and murdering a woman whose remains were later discovered in the woods near Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Evans spent his final night in this quietude, drifting to sleep around midnight with Reverend Church of Providence, Rhode Island, by his side. At 5:30 a.m., he consumed a substantial breakfast and sipped tea. When asked by Church if he had any last words, Evans simply stated, and I quote, "I have confessed everything. If the people don't believe it, I can't help it." As the execution hour approached, a throng of eager spectators amassed outside the prison. At 10:50 a.m., they were allowed inside where the gallows stood in the corridor between the guard room and the cell. Within moments, every advantage point was occupied, with some onlookers perched in the staircases to the cells, others packed around the scaffolding itself. And at 11 a.m., Evans, clad in a black suit, was escorted through the crowd by the prison warden. He ascended the scaffold unaided, murmuring something inaudible as his limbs were bound. He seemed quite calm and uh, basically just quite calm and had his faculty. Though those nearest the scaffold noted his knees were shaking. The noose was fitted around his neck, and a black hood was placed over his head. After the death warrant was read, Sheriff Odlin activated the trapdoor mechanism, and at precisely 11:06 a.m. on Tuesday, February 17, 1874, Franklin Evans, the elderly serial killer, met his end. He hung suspended, gradually asphyxiating for almost 20 minutes until his heart ceased to beat and the physician on duty pronounced him dead. In a twist of irony, given his assertion that his killings were to acquire anatomical knowledge to assist him as a physician, his body was given to Dartmouth College for dissection by its students. So, how did the ghost story catch a serial killer? See, Brent intended his book to reignite interest in the case as it had waned in the summer of 1865, hoping it might provoke the murderer, if still living, into feeling remorse and perhaps even confessing. The ghost story remains as the focal point of his work. Brent's book oscillates between a meticulous recounting of the double murder and a defense for the existence of ghosts. He included details from recent seances where letters supposedly written by the murdered girl and her father were read aloud, and another message purportedly from the boy who was also shared. Despite being unfamiliar with spiritualism, Brent felt compelled to incorporate these accounts into his narrative about the ghost. He was haunted by guilt, having himself spent the day of the murders in Bussy's Woods painting and target practicing, yet noticed nothing amiss, while he was there. However, Brent's unconventional approach, blending the crime with the ghost stories, was met with derision by many critics of his time. One review remarked, and I quote, "We are inclined to view this as a rather flimsy excuse for writing a book. It achieves no discernible purpose, nor does it serve any clear objective. It does not aid in identifying the killer, nor does it shed any light on the supernatural theories so popular today. While the public might find the gruesome details of the crime intriguing, it seems unlikely that anyone will gain anything from reading this work. However, if it had not been for his book causing such a stir and keeping the Joyce murders within the public eye, it's quite likely the connections to Evans would have never been made. Because you see, Evans did confess to murdering these children, but did later recant his confession on these. Um, However, he was in that general area during that time period when those two children were murdered. Now, if you are interested in reading the full story of Was It a Ghost? The Murders in Bussy Woods, an extraordinary narrative by author Henry Johnson Brent, you ever notice those old books, really long titles? Anyway, this book is now in the public domain, and you can get a free digital copy that can be found at www.gutenberg.org/ebooks / 69955. Or you can check out our shop page on our website to find links to hard copies available on Amazon. Being that we are Amazon affiliates, purchasing through our links helps to support our content creators. And of course, our website is psychobunnydc.com. So check us out there. We are going to shortly move to our after show on Patreon. So again, if you'll look down there on the ticker, if you are interested in supporting us and getting that exclusive content, um, that is where you need to go. And go through your browser. Again, I explained it at the beginning, we are not safe for work. If you will notice, there is a advisory on our content. So you will have to go through your browser, and it's simple. It's just www.patreon.com / the PBDC Collective Inc. Um, Once you subscribe, then it should show up on your app. Um, but do that if you're interested in supporting us. Tonight, for the after show, we are, since it's the premiere of our fall season here at the Horror Gallery, we're offering the after show to the $1 tier as well. Normally, that is not the case, but we do that every so often. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this. I found it quite satisfying for some of these like old stories that really don't tend to have a whole lot of conclusion, or there's doubt as to whether they really got the right person. I think in this case, they did. The gentleman, I mean, he was caught red-handed for the most part. Um, and it just kind of fit his MO. So, and I think it was cool that even though I don't really know how much Brent actually like believed in ghosts, but I think it was a very creative way. I think he was, like I said earlier, he was felt guilt. He felt guilt that he was in that area at that time, and he did not realize anything. Um, which kind of leads you to oh, there goes my kitty cat. Uh, uh, Leads you to kind of realize how wooded this area is, because I mean the children weren't found for 6 days, and this was June on an unseasonably hot summer. So that's that just kind of tells you how wooded this area was. So I just think it's ingenious that he found a way to keep this in the public eye, and it eventually led to the apprehension of the killer. So, yeah, I thought that was cool. So, anyway, so if you're interested, we are going to be covering the Dummerston Cemetery's deadly subterranean vine. This is an interesting story that really kind of connects actual occurrences with uh, kind of spooky old world like folklore. So I think you'll enjoy it. And if I can get it to work right, I've got some visual tools, little film while we watch this or while I talk about this to kind of help us talk about this a little bit. So I think you'll find that funny if I can keep up and talk fast enough and get it to work correctly. So yeah, so join us over there on Patreon. I will see you not next Friday, but the following Friday And pleasant nightmares, guys. Bye.